What's up, everybody? Welcome inside the MRN studios. It is another edition of MRN NASCAR Coast to Coast, where we go coast to coast discussing all things NASCAR regional racing. As always, I'm Chris Wilner, your host with the most. And out in Connecticut, my co-host, Kyle Ricky. K-Rick, I was so happy to see you in three dimensions this past weekend. It was hot in Nashville, but always good to reunite with the Motor Racing Network crew and cover some trucks in the dog days of summers we're talking about. Did you get hydrated after this weekend?
Yeah, it was a fun weekend. Christian Eckes dominated the race on Friday night, and like you mentioned, very warm as we ended the month of June there in Nashville. I understand you got a chance to experience Music Row
I did.
on what, Thursday night to kick off the race weekend?
Somebody was a little chicken and decided to
Not
stay back at
chicken.
the hotel because they were tired or wanted to watch the debate, which Broadway was a lot more fun than the debate. I'm going to tell you that much, Kyle. The people watching was awesome. Anytime you can get to Nashville, we went to Morgan Wallen's new joint down there on Broadway. That was cool. Saw Denny Hamlin, a little incognito, going into some establishments. So that was fun. Fun to be down there in Music City. Hopefully next year, Kyle, maybe you can come with me and we can do a little coast to coast from Broadway. A little update.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Well, we had opportunities, and you chose to stay at the hotel. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
I have nothing to say to that because you're right. I did.
That's right. He's kicking himself, folks, this week. Kyle Ricky missed out on a fun opportunity with C-Dub over here on Broadway. But I digress. Let's talk about this week. First off, everything go okay up at Stafford? I know you weren't on premise, but I'm sure you were tuned in to what was going on.
One of the best nights of the year. And of course,
Of course you missed it.
Having to spend it with you in Nashville. But
wow.
Yeah, it was a good night. All five divisions ran. It was one hiccup with the SK Light Modifieds, but when you have large fields and minimal experience, that'll happen. A great fireworks display to wrap up the night, a full grandstand, beautiful weather. You can't ask for much more than that. Some compelling stories in all five of the divisions heading back into action this Friday night.
Good to hear, and I know you'll get to be a part of this Friday night since you're not with us in Chicago. But let's quickly go over what happened this past weekend. Kyle, there was a couple big races going on, including at the our guest from last week, Jeff Striegel's Berlin Raceway, ARCA Menard Series, taking part at that tricky racetrack in Martin, Michigan. Wasn't tricky for William Sawalich. He backs up what he did a year ago, gets his second straight ARCA win at the facility. Fastest in practice, fastest in qualifying. Nobody was going to touch him. Maybe Andres Perez had one opportunity where he led for a brief period of time before William got it back. But other than that, it was the William Sawalich show, Kyle.
For about 6 laps for Perez, who was able to stick with William, who led 194 of the race's 200 laps. Another dominant performance. He has found his groove right now here mid-season for the ARCA Menard Series. Not running full-time. In fact, I was just checking over the championship standings a little bit ago. Top 11 in points have yet to win, led by Andres Perez, who is the championship point leader. And we've been wondering for about 2 years now, when is going to be that first win, because when the first one comes, I have a feeling the others will follow, or others will follow pretty quickly. But he's going to have to wait at least another week.
He will, for sure. Again, had a good race car and is consistent, but is constantly getting beat by those guys, not necessarily cherry picking, but these combo events or drivers coming over from the East or West Series. So great day for LeVar Scott, though, who finished second. Obviously, he is on the precipice of a great opportunity to win maybe before the year is out. He has been working hard at his craft, and Rev Racing giving him good race cars. So both Rev Racing drivers, both he and Andres Perez, having stellar afternoons. For William, I mean, this is, multiple different racetracks he's won it now. Let's think about it. You got Phoenix, Berlin, Mid-Ohio. So he's checked off kind of the, big track of Phoenix. We'll wait till he can get old enough to run a Talladega or a Kansas. But he's got Phoenix. He's got a road course in Mid-Ohio, short track of Berlin. I think he's kind of covered everything as far as the different disciplines of the racing. So he's going to be tough to beat anytime he's in the field for sure as he chases an East title again this year. Sean Hingorani finished third. Of course, he's contending for a West title as they get set to go this weekend back with Venturini. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Chris Wright and, of course, Andres Perez round out your top five. How about Gavin Bushell, Kyle? Haven't talked a lot about him, but he had experience with the Money in the Bank a few weeks ago in the late model and comes out and gets a top 10 and one of a couple that had a really good top 10 run, including Christian Rose as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those extra couple hundred laps about a week and a half ago there for their big midweek event helped for the ARCA Menard Series 200 lapper. It's all about getting lap time, getting experience, and Gavin did just that, finishing just outside of the top five, kept the car in one piece. Overall, I think a good day, a solid day for that team.
Tony Breidinger and Amber Balkin both getting top 10s for Venturini Motorsports as well. Coming up
Yep.
next for them, IRP, my home track, Indianapolis Raceway Park. It's the ARCA East and ARCA Menard Series combo event, the Circle City 200 at Lucas Oil, Indianapolis Raceway Park on July 19th. We go from ARCA, we go to the late models and round one of three of the Virginia Triple Crown. It was the South Boston, or Harley-Davidson South Boston 200. Of course, Brendan Queen was the big story, running the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series on Friday, then flying, I think he said, landing back here on this side of the country at about 3 a.m. and then took the drive up to Virginia and slept for about 4 hours and got behind the wheel of a race car. But it was to be for not on a magical story for him, because Connor Hall is having himself one heck of a 2024 season, Kyle. Not only does he have a Cars Tour win and is leading that championship, but 17 wins now on the year as he adds a Virginia Triple Crown win over the weekend at South Boston, a track he hasn't been good at in his career.
And it wasn't easy. A stacked field, having to come from the back outside of the top 30 to start the event, took the lead with just about 60 laps or so to go. He was in the top five well before halfway when they took their scheduled breaks during the course of the event. And after the final break, that's when he made his charge to the race lead, leading a bulk of the last 50 or so laps of the event. Great race, great crowd. It looked like it was a great atmosphere. I don't think it was an official sellout, but it was close, and race number 2 is already sold out for the Triple Crown. So that's pretty impressive going to Langley here in a couple of weeks,
I was about to
or less than
say,
a week.
well, and that's also partially the Dale Earnhardt Jr. effect, too, who
Yeah.
said he's going to run that race. But nonetheless, it is a crown jewel triple header. And so, yes, the Hampton Heat will be next. But to put a bow on this one, I mean, it's his first win at South Boston Speedway. Hard to believe because he's multiple wins at every other racetrack here in the Southeast, but South Boston has eluded him for so many years. But for Connor Hall, I think this just springboards him into not only the Triple Crown weekend, but contending for a Cars Tour champion and another NASCAR Advanced Auto Parts National Championship. But he had to battle Trevor Ward, his good buddy. We watched him last year at the Valley Star Credit Union 300 put on a show to win the Virginia Triple Crown, but he had to settle for second in that race. What a great job that he did in those final 50 laps, just trying to contend with Connor Hall. Caden Honeycutt led the opening 99, almost 100 laps up to the break. Good for him as he contends for a Pro Late Model Championship on the Cars Tour side of things. And, of course, Peyton Sellers doing Peyton Sellers things at South Boston. Couldn't get the win, but finishes right up there in fourth. Cade Brown round out the top five. Butterbean 8th. How about Timothy Peters? I forgot he was in the field until I saw the final rundown because he was kind of non-existent in this one, but finished 17th. And Bobby McCarty 25th. So like Kyle mentioned, Saturday, July 20th, Hampton Heat is round 2 of the Triple Crown. Of course, you can watch that on Flow. Brendan Queen is the defending winner of that race. We'll see if he can come back for it. Some other winners, Kyle. How about a big Bowman Gray Stadium storyline this weekend? Huge. 100th win for Tim Brown. And what better way to do it than to hold off your arch nemesis for so many years, Burt Myers? That was pretty special over the weekend.
Yeah, great race. Just a 25 lapper. Those two were at the front of the field most of the night. In fact, I think it was twin 25s for the modifieds, and Tim Brown able to pick up that 100th checkered flag. Now 5 wins in the win total ahead of Burt Myers, who is also trying to get to that 100 win mark, and I'm sure he will before I don't know about the end of the season. The season at Bowman Gray is winding down here as we hit the month of July, and they only have about 6 or 7 events left. But it's been fun for decades to watch these two go at it every Saturday night at Bowman Gray, and it's always fun when they're able to race for a special milestone win, like we saw last Saturday night when Tim Brown was able to pick up win number 100.
That's right, and he did it with his whole family. His kids were in Victory Lane. I know he was pretty emotional about that, too, as well, to hit that with everybody in attendance. So if you were at Bowman Gray, kudos to you. You got to watch some history and a great race to boot out there at the stadium. Some other winners this weekend: Trey Craig bested Ross Chastain, Josh Berry, and the rest of the late model field out at Nashville Fairgrounds Superspeedway. A pretty cool Battle of Broadway 150 that kind of led into NASCAR weekend.
Yep.
Ross and Josh Berry got into it too, so they were racing pretty hard, but Trey Craig called it the biggest win of his career, picking up the big win out there at Nashville Fairgrounds. Of course, he also held off Brett Robertson and Corey Deucer. Bubba Pollard doing Bubba Pollard things, his 37th career ASA Southern Super Series win at Five Flags. Kevin Harvick was in the field. Fortunately, Kevin couldn't quite get it figured out there late in the race. The handling went away on that car. He finished a lap down. Same too with Chase Elliott, who was in the field, but nonetheless pretty cool still to see them out there. It is a good time to be a late model driver, Kyle, and have some of these NASCAR stars just show up in your backyard and go race for some money.
Including Kyle Busch. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit as he's up here in the Northeast this week, along with Daniel Hemrick, racing as we record this here later tonight on Wednesday night. So we'll talk more about that later in the program. But you're right. There's a lot of big name drivers in NASCAR's 3 national series spreading their wings. We've said it for years. They need to get back to these short tracks and get that connection back that many say has been lost for quite some time between the national series competitors and the local short trackers. And we're seeing more and more of the national competitors back at these short tracks where they cut their teeth on so many years ago. So good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Fun to watch, and I know there's plenty more to come on the schedule in 2024. So that'll do it for kind of what happened this weekend. We've got a special guest for you coming up here at the other side of this break. We mentioned him just a little bit ago. His name is Connor Hall, and he is absolutely blazing through the 2024 season with 17 wins as he chases another national title, and of course leads the Cars Late Model Stock Tour Championship here as we hit the halfway point. We're going to talk to him on the phone live from Caraway Speedway because they're getting ready to race this weekend, or this week actually, later today. That's coming up next here on NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by Whelen Engineering.
Whelen Engineering, a global leader in the emergency warning industry, designs and manufactures reliable and powerful warning lights, white illumination lighting, sirens, controllers, and warning systems for the automotive, aviation, and mass notification industries worldwide. Whelen products are designed, sourced, and manufactured in America and tested on site to meet the toughest industry standards. Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. We never left, and we're here to stay.
Welcome back into NASCAR Coast to Coast on the Motor Racing Network, brought to you by Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. Whelen Engineering, and joining us now on the line at Caraway Speedway, it is your current points leader in the Cars Tour for the late model stocks, Mr. Connor Hall, driver of the number 22 Nelson Motorsports machine. Connor, appreciate you taking the time. I know you're getting ready to go for a busy night of racing at Caraway, but you're coming off the heels of a huge Virginia Triple Crown opener win at South Boston Speedway, so congratulations on that. Let's talk about that first. How big was it to get the monkey off the back and get a win at South Boston? I know you've been trying for so many years, but finally got it done this weekend.
Yeah, it was great. I went back, and that was our second attempt at that Sobo 200 race, and then had 2 other Cars Tour races there that went pretty well, but just couldn't get it done. So, to be able to get it done at, on that big of a platform at their biggest race of the year was obviously really exciting. And then we had a little bit extra drama involved and got to do it from the rear too, so that was great.
Yeah, kind of walk us through your drive to the front of the field, because it seemed like by halfway your name started to appear on the top 5 on the ticker at the top of the screen for those watching the race at home, and then suddenly by lap 60 you're battling for the race lead. Kind of walk us through your run to the front of the field.
Yeah, so I believe we started 33rd. So just obviously it was 200-lap race, got a lot of time. Sobo's a really, really tight racing surface, so usually when there's calamity there, it's hard to stay out of. So goal number 1 was just to keep the race car as clean as possible, so that if we were able to get to the front, we weren't prohibited from a good run just by maybe brake overheating or knocking the nose off of it or whatnot. So keep the equipment clean was rule number one. And then trying to keep, the balance consistent and, basically get into position at the halfway break so that we were at least close enough to be in, clean air, striking distance, kind of that deal. So when we popped on the 2 fresh tires and made, an adjustment, that it was close enough to what we needed to contend for the win. So we got to, I believe it was 7th at the halfway break, made a really, really good call, and just was able to, have the car and the balance that we needed to really charge after those last 50 laps.
Obviously, when you look at your season, Connor, and just how good you have been across many different racetracks, when you showed up to South Boston, qualified 23rd, and then had to make a tire change, did that deflate the confidence, or was that added motivation once you had to go through all that and say, okay, now it's time to, just put on a show and see how high we can get?
Yeah, I was deflated until I found out that the tire was leaking air at a considerable rate, just because we were so fast in practice, with all of our mock qualifying runs and whatnot. So I was a little puzzled, and I would say more puzzled than deflated. And then once we found, the air coming out of the tire, I was obviously, we still have a good race car. There was a reason why our qualifying performance wasn't up to where we thought it should be. So once we, elected to go to the rear with a fresh tire rather than start 23rd with the old scuff tire, it was just kind of a no-brainer that was going to be our best opportunity to at least have, a product that was insured rather than another old tire. So, at that rate, I'd said pretty much to NASCAR, turn the GoPro on, because there's only one way we're going from here, and that's forward. And so luckily we went a little bit more forward than I was actually, planning on, just because South Boston is really, really hard to pass usually. But we just kind of had a lights-out race car that night and was able to get it done.
If you can, and I'm sure it could be hard, describe the night, the field of cars, the competition, and I don't think it was a sold-out crowd, but it was darn close. It looked like an amazing atmosphere on the live stream. How was it from your perspective, being a part of all that pre-race pageantry and then obviously everything that happened post-race?
Yeah, so my energy pre-race was mainly consumed with, talking with NASCAR, with my crew chief, and just we were really obviously trying to figure out the tire situation. And then once that was settled, went to the drivers, the meet and greet, and that was good. A lot of people on the racetrack, a lot of good short track fans who obviously follow our series and whatnot. So that was always fun to kind of have some outreach and get to talk to the people who support you week in and week out. And we all pretty much know what happened on the racetrack. And then once I was able to get out, in South Boston, Victory Lane, the atmosphere was pretty intense. We had the awesome fireworks show. It was a really, really, really good production put on by South Boston.
Connor, I know we talked about it at the start of this interview, 17 wins this year. I know you're going for a second national title. You've done this before, but are you starting to pay attention to the standings, to things like that, as we kind of roll through the month of July here and kind of get into the willy-nilly of the season? How much do you pay attention? How much do you not pay attention to all that over the course of the season?
I would say it's obvious that we pay attention. I definitely log into my race pass at least once a week and just kind of take a look at the standings and who's coming, who's going, kind of thing. But as far as our game plan is just keep our head down. Obviously, there's a lot more racing left in the year, so we're in a really good position. I believe we're only about 10 points off of our total from last year already, but my goal is to try to break that 600 mark that hasn't been broken in a while, and just kind of, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity left for everybody else in the nation. So we're just going to keep working hard and staying at it.
We talk about the Virginia Triple Crown and what an incredible field that the opener had. We anticipate the same type of fields for races 2 and 3 here coming up. We talk about the Cars Tour. How would you kind of rate or grade late model racing right now in the South? Seems as healthy as it's been in a very long time.
Yeah, I would say late model racing, in my perspective, is definitely in an interesting place because we're finally hitting a level of exposure that the sport definitely needs. And I think as far as exposure and fan bases go, short track racing across America is in a good, especially late model racing is in a good place. Where I do wish that, obviously there could be some work done is the fact that it's not, it's not a secret that the cost of the race is obviously continuing to go up. And I think that if there was, take late model racing 10 years ago, it was definitely more affordable for your average Legends car racer or whatnot to try to make the step up. So I think the gap between something like a Legends car and a late model is maybe a little bit bigger than it used to be as far as the financial contribution needed to do it. So that's why I think it's a little harder to see the car counts at some places across the East Coast and whatnot. But as far as where late model stock car racing is like I said, as exposure and as a whole, and the people who still are doing it, I think the competition's incredible. I think the technology is beyond where I ever imagined it being. And I think we're in a good place. I think we did, obviously if there was a way to make them about half as expensive as they are, I mean, they're as good as it is now. There'd be no reason that Martinsville wouldn't have 125 cars trying to enter.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. Got to ask you, too, this year running with Nelson Motorsports, how has that been just gelling with the crew? Obviously, the success speaks for itself and kind of the tear you guys have been on, but as you fight for a Cars Tour championship and a national championship, what's it been like running that 22 car this year?
Yeah, it's been good. The beginning of the year, just obviously it's kind of like sticking your toe in a new hot tub. You're kind of see how hot the water is or how cold the water is, and after a couple of weeks, you kind of learn everybody's personalities, what everybody, is best to, or, most suited to do as far as their responsibilities and how the team, needs to work and operate. And I think, the beginning of the year was a little spotty, not bad. I mean, we had good runs, but I think we're definitely just starting to hit our midseason stride. And I'd rather finish the season off really, really well rather than start it really well and then fall off. So I think we're right where we need to be.
Final question for you, looking ahead to Hickory here in a couple of weeks, throwback weekend, what has become a tradition at that racetrack over the last several seasons. Is there any special paint schemes in the mix? Looking forward to that event here at the end of the month?
I have absolutely zero clue what Mr. Nelson has up his sleeve as far as a throwback this year. I do know I'm going to probably have a pretty mean mustache going on as far as my parts. So other than that, I'm growing the hair out, growing the mustache out. But as far as the car scheme goes, I think that's going to be up to Mr. Barry.
That's awesome. Oh, I can't wait to see it. Hey, before we let you go, you get Caraway tonight. William Byron's in the field. Also, I believe somebody else is too. I'm trying to think. Who else we have, Kyle? Corey Heim, too, as well in the field. Lane Riggs. So, I spaced on his name. So, do you like that when some of those guys come down and hop in a late model and test what they've learned on the national schedule against you guys running full-time?
Yeah, I mean, I always say they put their driving suit on the same way I do, but at the same time, it is a good way to showcase that, if you have a good run against those guys, obviously we're all familiar with them and their successes on the national series. So if you can have a good run against those guys, it just kind of solidifies the fact that a lot of these late model stock car guys could, if granted the opportunity, could move up to those top 3 series and, produce as well.
Absolutely. Well, I've been a proponent that you need to be the next one called up to get a Truck Series opportunity because we've seen what so many of the NASCAR regional drivers have done, including the guy you're running a championship with, Brendan Queen, do so far this year. So hopefully you get your shot. But Connor, best of luck tonight at Caraway and the rest of the season. Hopefully we'll talk to you here when we crown you another national championship.
Yep, that would be awesome. Until then, we're just going to keep grinding.
Absolutely. Connor Hall, Nelson Motorsports, getting ready to rip at Caraway tonight and, of course, chase another national championship over the rest of the year. We appreciate him joining us. Coming up next on the other side of the break, we've got the calendar and some news and notes here on a busy week, 4th of July week here in NASCAR racing. That's all next on NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by Wheelan Engineering.
Whelen Engineering, a global leader in the emergency warning industry, designs and manufactures reliable and powerful warning lights, white illumination lighting, sirens, controllers, and warning systems for the automotive, aviation, and mass notification industries worldwide. Whelen products are designed, sourced, and manufactured in America and tested on site to meet the toughest industry standards. Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. We never left, and we're here to stay.
Welcome back to NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. Whelen Engineering. Kyle, great conversation with Connor Hall. Of course, I'm looking forward to that race here tonight, and let's start there. It's the Firecracker 265 at Caraway. Obviously, when this episode airs, it's going to be over, but from your and I's perspective, this is another championship slugfest between 3 or 4 drivers at the front of the field for late model stocks, and it's like 2 points separating the top 2 in the pro late models. So nothing by any means is settled yet going into this race.
Connor Hall by 3 points over Brendan Queen, a whopping 12 back to Brent Cruz in the late model standings, and their field for tonight's race is stacked. William Byron, Corey Heim, Lane Riggs, just to mention a few of the national guys, plus Connor Hall and Katie Hettinger and all the regulars that follow the Cars Tour. Pro late models, Spencer Davis, a 2-point lead over Caden Honeycutt, and there's about 20 of those cars ready to take the green flag here tonight, including Jessica Coulter, who I haven't seen in years. I know she's doing a lot of late model racing down south, and we used to be on a go-kart team together years ago, so it was fun to see her name on the entry list. When we used to race at the Motorplex in Morrisville.
How did that fare for you, Kyle? You don't come across as a wheelman per se.
Well, there's a lot of trophies in this room right here. And she was on my team for one of them, so it was fun.
All right, maybe you'll have to flex some of those trophies and put them behind you next week's episode. But you're right. I mean, both championships are super tight. I think it's really cool, too. You mentioned William Byron and Corey Heim and Lane Riggs being in the field. So, I mean, this already is going to be one of the hardest Cars Tour races to win coming up for the late model stock regulars. But how about 2-time Caraway winner and former late model stock champion Jared Fryer? He's making his series debut. Don't forget, he was injured, if you haven't paid attention, back before the season started, a non-racing related incident, but he has been on the mend ever since, and that's been now 6-7 months, and he's just now getting back behind the wheel of a race car. He's going to make his debut this weekend, so another kind of stalwart of the series for many years, coming back and going to try to mix it up with our championship favorites. So it'll be fun to see Jared Fryer back in the field. And of course, you mentioned the Pro Late Model side of things. 19 points separate the top 4. So a lot of change is going to happen here coming up. So that race, of course, is happening tonight as we record this on Wednesday, but we'll break it all down for you next week. Speaking of breaking it down, we've got 2, not 1, but 2 ARCA West races for your 4th of July festivities. One of those which is on Thursday, as this show is brought to you. The other on Saturday. We're talking about the Napa Auto Parts 150 presented by the West Coast Stock Car Motorsports Hall of Fame. Both races from Irwindale Speedway. Of course, one of these was also a makeup from back in April when they had a rain out. So a doubleheader for the ARCA West Series out at Irwindale, one of my favorite West Coast short tracks. It's an incredible facility just outside of Los Angeles. And again, both races will be on flow. Tyler Reif in the championship, 11 points lead over Sean Hingorani. But here's the thing, Kyle. Sean has teamed back up with Venturini. Same team he won the championship with a year ago. So we documented earlier this year, he's raced for, 4 different teams now?
3 or 4 teams, yeah.
Right. So what do you think? I think, is this the winning move for him to reunite with Venturini?
Well, he has 2 shots to prove, to see if it is the winning combination with Venturini and Sean. Obviously, so much success last year. Not sure what happened going into this year, but they're back together at the Irwindale Speedway where they found a bunch of success last season. Can't wait for the doubleheader. It's interesting, an interesting schedule with the day in between the 2 races, a Thursday and Saturday. I guess they anticipate the teams obviously committing to spend the entire, most of the 4th of July weekend there from the 5th all the way to the 8th. So look forward to seeing both races. Good fields, like you mentioned, Tyler Reif, the championship point leader, Jack Woods there, Eric Johnson also competing for Bill McAnally. Cole Raz is back in the field as well. And a pretty cool story with a retired police officer from Maryland going to be in the field as well this weekend.
That's right. That's Rick Goodale, retired police officer, getting the shot behind the number 31 Rise Motorsports Chevrolet. Team owner Tim Gouillet is going to resume driving duties on the Saturday portion. But tip of the cap to Mr. Goodale, getting one, thank you for your service, and two, getting a shot at some big time auto racing out there at Irwindale Speedway. So that's gonna be fun to watch. Also, set your calendars before this show airs next week. We will have completed the 45th running of the Slinger Nationals at Slinger Speedway. That's coming up on Tuesday next week. So a Tuesday night show. We're typically used to seeing that, but Kyle, there's already 30 plus entries on the entry list. 5 former winners, including three-time defending champ Ty Majeski, Wisconsin's son, going to try to make it a 4th national win out there at the Slinger Nationals, but he's going to have to contend with 5-time winner Lowell Bennett, Rich Bickle, and the 4-time winner, and of course Luke Fenhaus, who won it in 2021. What is the significance of the Slinger Nationals? Obviously, you look at short track crown jewels, but this one, sometimes it's off of people's radars. I don't know why, because Slinger is an incredible racetrack, but what makes this event so special?
Just the tradition behind it, I think. I think every region around the country has those significant events. We talk about events like the Sizzler up here in the Northeast, and all of the special events down south at New Smyrna Speedway. For the Midwest folks, it's at that racetrack, and a very cool racetrack. I mean, if you've never watched a race at Slinger Speedway, a high-banked, very tight quarter mile, they get around there in a hurry. There's a lot happening at all 4 corners at any given time. Makes it fun to watch. And Ty Majeski, one of those drivers that has that place figured out, grew up there, has found so much success there over the years. And obviously, I think one of the early favorites for the Slinger Nationals next week.
Yeah, and he's been a little vulnerable this year on the late model side of things. Hasn't run full-time. I mean, last year we saw him run the full ASA Stars National Tour en route to the championship. This year he's kind of cherry-picking some races when he can, focusing his energies on the Truck Series stuff, but sure, he's going to be a favorite going in. Johnny Sauter, former Truck Series champ, is in the field, as well as Winchester 400 winner from a year ago, Gio Ruggiero. So a lot of star power coming up this next Tuesday at Slinger for the Slinger Nationals. Some weekly racing going on this week, Kyle. We got Meridian on Thursday, home of the SK Modified Stafford on Friday, Jennerstown, Riverhead, Smart Mods also at Caraway, following up the Cars Tour, Berlin Raceway running their weekly schedule, Super Mods at Oswego, Langley, Hickory all Saturday, and then the Firecracker 100 at Thunder Road in Barrie, Vermont on Sunday. So a lot of racing on your menu for you this 4th of July holiday. Kyle, give us your driver of the week this week.
Oh boy, I have a couple to choose from. They're both international drivers. Okay. Liam Hesmans picked up the win at Raceway Venray, easy for me to say. The Super Oval there for the NASCAR Whelen Euro Series, first time that they have raced there in 7 years. Kind of a dominant win. The race went, for the most part, green to checkered, one minor spin late in the event. Hesmans currently the championship point leader over Vittoro Garelli by 7 points as they head into the second half of their season. Also, I guess my driver of the week will probably be the guy that swept the double features last week for the NASCAR Canada Series. Kevin Lacroix picking up both feature wins this past weekend. They ran a doubleheader at the Riverside Speedway. Lacroix currently just 4 points out of the championship lead behind Andrew Ranger. 2 great races, a little bit of attrition in race number 2, some yellow flag fever, but fun to watch on Flow Racing this past week from Riverside. They're right in the middle of their season up there north of the border. So tip of the cap to Kevin Lacroix, winning not once, but twice this past week.
I like it. A little international flavor. And speaking of which, this weekend, NASCAR is running the streets of Chicago, and a NASCAR Euro driver is going to make his Xfinity Series debut with us here in the States, and that's Alan Day, getting the shot to run the road course or the street course out at Chicago. So, Kyle, I mean, we've seen Alex Labay, who's also in the field again, of course, former NASCAR Canada Series competitor. Some of these drivers coming across, but NASCAR Euro, I feel like, has gotten not as much representation. So how big of an opportunity is this for Alan Day this weekend?
It's huge. He hasn't competed in the NASCAR Whelen Euro Series full-time this season. I don't think last season, but was very successful in the number of years that he competed, winning championships another one of my go-kart partners, by the way, at the Motorplex.
Wow.
Great guy, great personality. I am so glad he has this opportunity, and hopefully he can make the most of it. Kind of like what we saw, with Shane Van Gisbergen last year from the supercar world. He's bringing that NASCAR Euro flair into Chicago this weekend, and good for him. And hopefully he can make the best of it.
I hope so too. It's a great story. Looking forward to meeting him this weekend on the streets of Chicago. Hey, a couple other news and notes before we let the folks go. Hampton Heat, I know you kind of alluded to it, sold out already. So we're
Crazy.
looking at 3 weeks before we are sold out for that. And then Eric Jones is now the first NASCAR driver to officially submit his entry form to the Battle of Berlin at Berlin Raceway, the other crown jewel event for that racetrack coming up in a few weeks' time. So good to see Eric Jones try to come back again. He finished the top 3 for the Money in the Bank. Couldn't quite close the deal. We'll see if he can do it later on this summer. And then you mentioned, too, as we speak, it is night number 2 of the Celebration of America 300 at Oxford Plains. It is the past series, the super late models up there, Kyle Busch, Daniel Hemrick in the field. Both of those drivers, solid runs on their opening nights. I think Kyle was 8th, Daniel Hemrick was like 15th on the
Yep.
twin qualifier nights. It was Kyle Reed and Trevor Sanborn that got the wins and the automatic bids to tonight's feature. So we'll see what happens with that. The format's a little bit different, Kyle, but do you think Kyle and Daniel have a shot to make the starting field for the 300 tonight?
I think they'll both make the fields.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough with another round of qualifying coming up before they ran those twin races last night. Sanborn and Reed picking up the wins, both starting deep in some of the non-qualifying races here coming up later on today. But I think they'll both get in, and should be a good race there for the Pro All-Star Series super late models here in the northern New England part of the country.
Of course, countdown to the Oxford 250 coming up. It'll be here before you know it for sure.
Yep.
So I know a lot of drivers getting tuned up for that. So a lot of good stuff coming up this weekend and happening right now. Of course, we'll break it all down for you next week, but our order of business at hand is coming up here in just a few short days, and that is the NASCAR trip to Chicago, year number 2 in the streets of Lake Michigan, right off the horizon there, off of Lakeshore Drive. It is going to be an incredible weekend of racing, and of course, MRN is your home for all things NASCAR street race this weekend, beginning Saturday afternoon, I should say, 12:30 Eastern Time, with Cup Series practice and qualifying. Immediately following that is the Loop 110 for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, their event at 3 p.m. Eastern, all leading into NASCAR Live Race Day on the air at 3:30 Eastern, leading you into the Grant Park 165 for the NASCAR Cup Series. Kyle, I tell you what, it is one of my favorite events of the year, and we don't know the future of it, but I do know it's looking a lot more promising than it was last year weather-wise, so looking forward to having a good race out there and seeing who can maybe stop SVG. I would assume he's the favorite, but I don't know. I think we may see some drivers up their road course and street course game here for year number 2.
Yeah, never really got to experience the event last year as it was intended to be, an experience with concerts and all sorts of activity in and around that race course in downtown Chicago. So looks like Mother Nature's going to cooperate this year. The on-track product will probably look a lot different than what we saw a year ago because the track won't be all but underwater. So it should be a great race. There's a lot of outsiders that we've been talking about coming from all these other different road racing series from around the world. They're going to be participating in both races over the weekend. So it'll be fun to see how they fare this weekend.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. MRN, again, your home beginning Saturday, 12:30 Eastern, and all through the weekend. Well, Kyle, enjoy your weekend up at Stafford. How's the weather looking? Are we going to get these shows rolling now as we hit the 4th of July weekend?
We're looking good right now. Sunny and about 84 degrees on Friday evening. So that's about as good as it can get, especially after what we experienced in the month of May with all the rain.
Yeah, 100%. Now, just be careful with those fireworks, all right? We don't need you burning any limbs or anything. We still need you for the rest of the year.
We're good.
Okay, good. All right,
We're
good. All right, well, thank you, folks, for tuning into this episode of NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. Whelen Engineering. For our guest, Connor Hall, our producer, Pat Jaggers, and, of course, Kyle Rickey. My name is Chris Wilner. We'll see you next week and break it all down here on Coast to Coast.